Fox News fill-in host Sarah Palin has revealed that she does not want to overturn the U.S. government with a revolution. She just wants to undo the first revolution. Our fourth story tonight, Palin wants America to return to the way it used to be in 1775, which might explain why a new poll finds that the libertarian constitutionalist half of the Tea Party wants nothing to do with her. Politico did an exit poll at last week's Tax Day Tea Party in Washington, finding the group united in distrust of government, but split into two wings. 53% of them, the Ron Paul wing that wants to limit government involvement in daily life. It said it would never consider voting for Palin. And then there's the Sarah Palin wing that both distrusts government and wants government to get involved in everybody's life and promote traditional values. Palin spoke at an evangelical conference attacking one of the traditional values on which the nation was founded. Lest anyone try to convince you that God should be separated from the state, our founding fathers, they were believers. Funny they didn't mention him in the Constitution. Quote, no religious test shall ever be required as a qualification to any office. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. Thomas Jefferson, quote, the legitimate powers of government extend to such acts only as are injurious to others, but it does me no injury for my neighbor to say there are 20 gods or no God. A believer? Quote, the day will come when the mystical generation of Jesus, by the Supreme Being as his father in the womb of a virgin, will be classed with the fable of the generation of Minerva in the brain of Jupiter. She also complained about President Obama's outreach to Muslims. Hearing any leader, she said, declare that America isn't a Christian nation, it is mind-boggling. Not to the founders. President John Adams, of course, signed the Treaty of Tripoli, his outreach to Muslims. Quote, the government of the United States of America is not in any sense founded on the Christian religion. That was ratified by the United States Senate without debate unanimously in 1797. Don't be discouraged, she said, by the mocking of those who claim to want to claim we just cling to our religion. I'm the first to admit, yea, I do cling to my faith. That's all I've got. Jefferson said ridicule is the only weapon which can be used against unintelligible propositions. Ideas must be distinct before reason can act upon them, and no man ever had a distinct idea of the Trinity. It is the mere abracadabra of mountebanks calling themselves the priests of Jesus. On that note, let's bring in Marcos Molitzis, see if he can follow that. Founder and publisher of the Daily Kos and author of Taking on the System, Rules for Radical Change in a Digital Era. Marcos, good evening.
Good evening, Keith.
A potential Republican frontrunner explicitly calls for an end to separation of church and state. Is this not exactly what Jefferson and Adams and Washington were fighting against?
Well, clearly those guys were elitist.
Yes.
Probably arugula. Clearly. You can't expect Sarah Palin to actually read her history of the founding of America. And it might be too much to ask her to actually read the U.S. Constitution and see that, like you just mentioned, religion's only mentioned in two places. But all she has to do is look at that first sentence where it says, we the people. I mean, because she read the first sentence, we the people. And that basically, that states where the authority of the United States of America is vested on. It's vested in us, the people. Not in a higher power, not in God, not in a Christian God, in we, the people. And for Palin to go around claiming that essentially putting words in the mouth of the Founding Fathers is quite insulting, I think, to the very history of our nation's founding.
Well, but not if George Washington was a communist. How do with this fascinating Politico exit poll, identifying the Paulite Tea Partiers and the Palinite Tea Partiers as basically two totally separate, distinct groups. How do the Palinites reconcile this distrust of government and this smaller government idea with this simultaneous desire to grow government so it promotes traditional values? Wouldn't it just be the similar-sized government just doing different things?
Yeah, no. Bottom line is that they're not in for smaller government. They want their government that reflects their beliefs. So, under Bush, I mean, government grew greatly. He had started illegal wars without justification. He spied on Americans without court order. He did all these great, huge, horrible things, expanding the scope of government. There were no teabaggers then. They didn't care because they actually liked that kind of government. So it's not bigger government that they're against. They're against democratic government. They're anti-democratic. And I say that in the big D, democratic, as in the Democratic Party, and in the small d, with basically disrespect for democracy in this nation. I mean, this is what the people voted for, and it's one thing to oppose it on policy. It's another thing to use the kind of exterminationist, eliminationist rhetoric that they're using in appealing to violence and that sort of thing.
Yeah, like this sort of thing. This is a slight tangent here, but it's apropos. The State House in Arizona this afternoon approved attaching this amendment to a piece of extant legislation, and this would now demand that anybody who's running for president in Arizona has to show their birth certificate to officials in Arizona. And apart from the fact that the Arizona House just made themselves look like a bunch of clowns, you can't pass a state law about eligibility for a federal election, can you?
No, obviously they can't, and they're making a mockery of the system, of course. You know what? John McCain would not have passed that test. Mm-hmm. He was not born in the United States of America.
And last point, back to our...
and that's not a conspiracy theory. He was actually born in Panama.
Yes. It's on the records, and unfortunately there's no way to hide that at this point. But last point, back to our Palinites and Paulites discussion. That has to be a clash at some point, doesn't it? What happens then?
Well, right now they have a common enemy, so they can both focus on Barack Obama's Kenyan birth certificate, and I think that's good enough for them. They're out of power. They don't have control of legislation, so really there doesn't have to be a clash at this point. They can sort of continue to be united in opposition. Now, if they were to take power, I think all hell breaks loose, but that's a whole different story, and hopefully it's not one that we'll have to talk about for some time.
Yeah, if they take power, all hell breaks loose anyway.
Exactly.
Markos Moulitsas of Daily Kos, as always, thanks for your time.
Thank you very much.